Hello everyone, my name is Rifqi Imanullah, and today I will be presenting my bachelor's thesis, which is entitled The Role of Social Approval in Determining the Information Disclosure of Social Media Users. So the presentation will be divided into 4 different parts, starting from the background, followed by the research issue and methodology, followed by findings and analysis, and it will end with the conclusions. So the background part will present a general overview of the theoretical background of the main variables observed in the study. So firstly, I will give more or less a definition of the privacy paradox. So at this moment, there's no agreed upon definition amongst scholars for what the privacy paradox is. But nevertheless, the definition of the privacy paradox can be more or less explained in the following. The privacy paradox is a dichotomy between how a person claims to advocate the protection of their online privacy while showing behavior and tendencies that show otherwise. So moving on to the examples of the privacy paradox, specifically for the study, privacy paradox behavior will only be explored in the context of social media. SNS users claim to be concerned with their privacy but repeatedly does the following. Such as firstly, there's personal information disclosures, which can be in the form of publicizing a user's name, address, education, etc. And also, there's following commercial companies, which can make users be subjected to targeted advertisements. And lastly, there's people also rarely check their privacy settings. As for the antecedents of the privacy paradox, some of the examples would be low self-esteem, a high need for social approval, collectivistic cultural background, and so on. So social approval is the main independent variable of this study, and the APA Dictionary of Psychology defines social approval as the following. Social approval is the positive appraisal and acceptance of someone or something, a behavior, trait, attribute, or the like by a social group. Its manifestations may include compliments, praise, statements of approbation, and so on. So for whom is this study relevant to? The implications of the study are relevant for researchers that seek further understanding of the privacy paradox. For instance, behavioral economists and business researchers are still studying this phenomenon. Alternatively, the study is also relevant for social media providers, in the sense that a more responsible strategy by these companies could be implemented. So we will move on to the part of research issue and methodology. For the research issue, it's basically that the factors that cause the privacy paradox are still regarded as quite confusing and puzzling to researchers and managers. Past research have provided some implication that social approval may be one of the causes that explains the frequency of information disclosure. But nevertheless, this hypothesis is yet to be thoroughly discussed in literature. So from this research issue, it begs the question, what is the research question? The research question of my study is, how does social approval influence the frequency of information disclosure? The objective of this research is to prove that social approval does indeed positively affect the frequency of social media information disclosure. The variables of this study can be seen in the conceptual model here. Age, gender, culture, and self-esteem are control variables, while social approval is the main independent variable. Information disclosure, on the other hand, is the dependent variable. The main hypothesis of this study is that the need for social approval has a positive effect on the frequency of information disclosure. This hypothesis has been proven to be true in the study, since I have found a positive causal relationship between social approval and information disclosure. As for the data collection process, I use a Qualtrics online survey generator, and it takes around 4 to 5 minutes from start to finish. The image shown here is the introduction of the survey shown to the respondents, and it describes the goal of the research and the concepts of each variable. These are other examples of what the survey looks like, with, for example, questions about gender on the top right corner, and age on bottom right, and self-esteem evaluation, which can be seen on the left. So as for the sample characteristics that I've gathered from my study, there's a total of 107 respondents. 78.5% of the respondents are Indonesians, and the rest of the Dutch populace. Females consist of 54.2% of the sample, and moreover, there are no missing values found in the sample. The statistical analysis used to evaluate the results consists of factor analysis, descriptive statistics, correlations tests, and regression analysis. Each statistical analysis will be further explained in the findings and analysis section later on. So moving on to the findings and analysis section. Firstly, for the statistical analysis, I conducted the factor analysis, and it was conducted to identify the items that could be categorized within the same variable, which is based upon the strength of correlations of the observed variance. The picture in the bottom shows the Kaiser-Meyer-Olkin measure of sampling adequacy, and in this factor analysis, I've had a value of 0.729, making it acceptable as it is above the threshold of 0.6. Moving on, this is the pattern matrix of the factor analysis that I've conducted. So the study uses the loading threshold value of 0.4 to determine which items to drop or include. Various items for the variables were dropped to ensure better results based on whether they had low factor loadings. As it can be seen from the pattern matrix table, we can see that the remaining items load quite well to the factors they belong to, as they are all above 0.4. Following the execution of factor analysis, a thorough description of the variables is crucial in providing sufficient information regarding the research. Therefore, I conducted a descriptive statistics analysis. And what I found was that there are 7 respondents aged above 46 years old which are considered to be outliers. But despite them being outliers, they will still be included in the study, because I still need to track the data of the older generation. Furthermore, the variables of the sample seem to fall between the range of -1.5 to +1.5, except for age with a skewness value of 3.287. So that makes it positively skewed. And for the kurtosis values, all the variables seem to fall between the range of -2 to +2, which means that these variables can be described to be more or less acceptable. Age, on the other hand, has a kurtosis value of 9. Moving on to the correlation test. So I conducted a Pearson's correlation test, which is only done to check the correlations between the variables and not to prove cause and effects relationships. The correlation matrix shown in the picture here presents the strength of association between all the variables and shows whether the correlation is positive or negative. For instance, the variables information disclosure and social approval are positively and significantly correlated. This implies that when a high frequency of information disclosure is present, they are also found to have high levels in the need for social approval, and vice versa. For the regression analysis, the under-standardized coefficient of social approval is found to be 0.949, and it is significant at 1% level. This means that for every 1 unit increase in the need for social approval, there's also a 0.949 increase in information disclosure, with all other things being equal. The variables that are found to be statistically significant are gender, age, and social approval, while self-esteem and culture are insignificant. In this output here, we can see that there are no signs of multicollinearity because all the VIF values are all below 2.5. So for the last part, I will discuss about the conclusions of the study. I will explain first about the managerial and theoretical implications. The results of this study are likely to be applicable by managers in social media companies such as Facebook and Instagram, and also policymakers that deal with the issue of online privacy. Social media companies have been known to take advantage of the need for social approval, and hence a large number of people are influenced to disclose information to receive social approval from others. What I hope is that research of this study will influence policymakers worldwide to regulate social media companies with stricter laws. Previous research and literature has repeatedly emphasized behavioral intention as a predictor of the privacy paradox, but social approval is still rarely discussed as a predictor. This study has proved that social approval can be one of the predictors of information disclosure, and it must be emphasized that this is one of the factors that must be taken into account for subsequent research. As for the limitations of the study, firstly, out of this 107 respondents, respondents of Dutch residents and those aged above 35 consist of 21.5% and 7.5% of the sample respectively, which means that they are underrepresented. This may create certain biases in the statistical analysis of the study and prevent generalizable results. Moreover, some of the hypotheses in the study are rejected due to statistical insignificance, such as culture and self-esteem. This contradicts previous research, which suggests that those two variables should have an influence on information disclosure. For future results, firstly, I would like to mention that studies that consider social approval have rarely been conducted, and with the findings of this study predicting that social approval does indeed predict excessive online disclosure, social approval is an important variable that should also be taken into account when other researchers want to predict the privacy paradox in future studies. If the privacy paradox issue is to be taken seriously in the future, then studies such as these are hoped to play a part in raising awareness about the issue by contributing to our incremental understanding of the subject. That will be all for my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.